This is the third week in a row that we've been meditating on chapter 5 in Matthew's Gospel, the Sermon on the Mount. It begins with the most famous section, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's followed up by what we heard last week. You are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. And in this section, which is completed next Sunday, there are 6 antitheses, statements that Jesus makes on his own authority. We hear 4 of those antitheses this Sunday and then 2 of them next week. Jesus speaks on his own authority. It was common for rabbis to quote another rabbi, so-and-so, to bolster their argument, but Jesus doesn't do that. He says that he has not come to break the law, but to fulfill it. And the fulfillment of that law is a challenge to us even today. I would suggest that if you're not challenged by this gospel, then you're not hearing it. Jesus says, here's the old way, but here's what I say to you. Here's the fulfillment of the law. Let me break these 4 antitheses down into 3 different categories. Jesus talking about anger, Jesus talking about the gift of human sexuality, Jesus talking about speaking truth. The first one, anger. You've heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you, if you're angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. We're struggling here in Chicago, aren't we, with even the basic of that law, where regularly the president and members of the media point out Chicago for our high murder rate. But Jesus ups the ante and he says, it's not just pulling the trigger, words can kill. Looks can kill. The anger in our heart that we hold toward one another. Jesus says, you will be liable to the fires of Gehenna. Gehenna was this garbage pit outside Jerusalem where they burned their garbage. And there was so much garbage that the fire never went out. And there were worms that were particularly hard to kill that thrived in that culture. That's the image that Jesus uses for hell. He said that when we destroy one another's reputation, when we trash one another callously, and we all do it from time to time, sometimes politely, sometimes not so politely. Jesus says, literally, there will be hell to pay for that. Area number 2, human sexuality. You've heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Jesus would certainly say, or any woman who looks with lust at another man has already committed adultery with him in her heart. The old standard, don't do it. The new standard, don't even think about it. It's not just the act, Jesus says. Where does sin begin? It begins in our minds and it worms its way into our hearts. Sexuality is this precious gift that God has given us. Jesus is not anti-sex. God created sex. Sex is all about vitality. It's about joy. It's about romance. It's about commitment. But it's not an end in and of itself. Human sexuality is meant to knit us together in relationships sanctified by marriage. Pornography is a huge issue in our society today. A huge issue. If you're struggling with it, as many of us are, get help. Bring it into the sacrament of reconciliation. Seek counseling. If it's a chronic area in your life, go into a 12-step program. There's lots of resources available on the internet. The internet can destroy us through pornography, but there's also lots of help available there. Break the veil of secrecy. Crack the shame. Any addiction, but especially sexual addiction, thrives in secrecy and shame. If you're struggling in this area, bring it out of the shadows into the light of Christ's love. Get the help you need. Jesus goes on. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman, a divorced woman, commits adultery. The Catholic Church historically has taken this text very literally and has called for those who end up, unfortunately, in divorce to seek an annulment. The annulment process is all about healing the hurt. Divorce always shatters the heart. It's a commitment that's broken. It's not just the husband that's wounded or the wife that's wounded. It's the children that are wounded. It's the grandchildren who are wounded. The process of annulment that the Catholic Church insists on is a process of healing those deep wounds. So that if you go into another relationship, you don't bring the baggage of the past. Because you know with every subsequent marriage, the chances of divorce escalate. We start out at 50%. And those who are divorced and remarried have a 70% chance of failure. Those who enter into another marriage have an 80% chance of failure. Which is why the church insists on an annulment. Face those mistakes courageously and get the healing that we all need. And one of the issues that Pope Francis has raised up recently in this church in the Synod on the Family is, what about those couples who are divorced and remarried but who have never been annulled, but they're in a stable relationship for 5, 7, 10 years? And traditionally they're deprived of the sacraments because their marriage has never been blessed by the church. If you're in that situation, Cardinal Supich, in his interpretation of the Apostolic Discourse, the joy of love, Cardinal Supich has counseled us priests to encourage you to come to your priests and talk about your situation. What Pope Francis has raised up is that no two marriages are the same. And the law cannot adequately negotiate all of the complexities of human relationship. If you're in a divorced and remarried situation but not annulled, but it's a stable relationship, come, talk to Father Terry, talk to Father John Paul or myself, some priest that you trust, to get some counsel in the formation of your conscience and a pathway back to the sacraments. Area number 3, speaking the truth. Again, that you have heard it said to those in ancient times, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all. Let your word be yes if yes, and your no be no, and anything more is from the evil one. Jesus is calling us to a culture of honesty. Jesus says, as a Christian, speak the truth. That is so difficult. Because what is truth? What are the facts? What are the alternate facts? We live in a culture of spin. Where we get our news from, who we listen to as the voice of authority, determines what we view as true. Where do you get your news? Who speaks the truth? Is it Fox News or CNN? Is it the presidential tweets or is it NPR? Is it the New York Times or People magazine? Brothers and sisters, I hope you're challenged by this gospel because we are in this together. Jesus invites us to look at the anger that is seething inside each one of us and is reaching a boiling point within our culture right now. And to be honest, it frightens me where we are in our country, where we are in our world right now. We're not heading in the right direction. And it's not different for us Christians. It's not different for us Catholics. That's the sad reality. Jesus says, I'm calling you to a higher bar. Folks, this is mature spirituality. This isn't the basics. This is the heart of what it means to be a Christian. How we speak about one another, how we embrace the gift of human sexuality, how we're able to embrace the truth. I hope you're challenged by these words, because I sure as heck am. The challenge of the gospel. But here's the reward that Jesus promises. St. Paul speaks it truly in his letter to the Corinthians. He says, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it even so much occurred to the human mind what God has ready for those who love him. Is it worth it? It hasn't even occurred to us the reward that God has in store for those who choose the higher standard of love. Amen? Amen.
Heart to heart, hand in hand, praying for grace to understand. Spirit of Jesus, open our hearts to live and to love the gospel